We're back. We're going to talk a little bit more about some arrays, and we're going to talk about a searching algorithm for arrays. When you search an array, there's a couple different ways you can do that, but the one we're going to talk about today is called a linear search. And a linear search is one that begins with the first data item, and it processes them one atom at a time from the beginning to the end, and it just keeps looking for that item. As you guys are working through your Greenfoot, you might be looking for a particular bouncy ball, a wombat, a leaf, a piano key. Those are examples of searching. The algorithm we're going to talk about here is this one. And that is, we're going to use what's called a flag variable. And a flag variable is a value that you will indicate whether an event occurred. And we will also follow these steps. So we're going to set a subscript value to 0, which is starting at the 0th element in an array. We're going to set our flag value to false. Then we're going to look inside the array one element at a time. If the values match, I'm going to set the flag value to true. If it does not match, we're going to increment the subscript. And we're going to do this with the JDoodle example here in just a moment. I'm going to use the example with the parallel arrays that we set up before with my children. And I'm going to show you a couple other things as well. One is, on this particular scenario, because we initialized the value of the arrays, we didn't really have to use this final. We were using it to control the loop. But there's a trick that we can use that actually takes and finds the value of the length of the array. It's called names.length, or I could do age.length. It's whatever the array is named .length. If I take out that final int and we execute this code just to see if it works, we're going to be able to see that it works as it did before. So the first item, before we talk about searching for an element, is that you can use the length of an array by just typing in the name of the array .length. That's a built-in method that you guys can use. All right. Secondly, we are going to search through this array, and we want to find, I'm just going to say, a target value of 25. So the first thing that we're going to do is set a subscript variable to start at 0, and usually that's the index values for the array. So I'm going to create an index value, and I'm going to set it to 0. That's step number 1. Number 2, we're going to initialize a flag variable to false. So a flag variable, because it's false or true, is going to be Boolean. And we're going to just say, I'm going to call it isFound, and I'm going to set it equal to false, because we haven't found the item. Then I'm going to examine each element in the array. Before I do that, I am going to identify my target value, and I just decided that it would be 25. So I'm looking for the number 25 in the age array. That's my goal. Because I want to stop execution of the loop, if I find the value, for example, think of this as not just 3 elements, but maybe it's 3,000 elements. If I find the value I'm looking for, I don't want to process all 3,000 elements. So I want to be able to stop if I find it. So I'm going to use a while loop, and I'm going to check to see if I have found the value. If it's true, then we're going to be done. So actually, if I want to be true when it's done, isFound is true, I need to reverse that. If it's false, we're going to go into the loop. We're going to enter the loop. Now inside the loop, I want to examine an array element. And so I have to ask a question. If my name of my array, age, bracket, index, so I'm starting that at 0, is the target value. If it's equal to 25. If that's true, I'm going to set my flag value to true. And what will happen is then my code will not execute anymore. I will break out of the loop at that time. If it isn't met, if I look at my steps, examine each element, if the value matches, set the flag to true. If the value does not match, increment the subscript. So if it does not match, I'm going to need to say index plus plus. Now it's possible that I could read this as an if else, because if it matches, we're going to set the flag to true. Otherwise, we're going to increment the index. So I'm going to say else because the only time I'm going to get to the else is if my flag value was actually true. Okay? So my else statement, if I fix my indenting, I'm going to set it up this way. If age bracket index is the target, I'm going to say it's found. Is found is true. Otherwise, I'm going to increment the index. I have to make sure that I close off my while loop. And then after I get done with my while loop, I'm going to take a look at, or I'm going to test my target value, my Boolean value. I'm going to say something like this. If is found, which means I actually found it, then I will output something like this, system.out.println, and I will just say value was found. Otherwise, I will just print that the target or the value was not found. So I'm just going to print was or was not found based upon that Boolean variable. Please notice, after I spell it correctly, with a capital F there, I did not check to see if this was true. And the reason I did not do that is that is found is already a Boolean. So it's already true or false. So if I say if is found, it's going to actually test if true or if false. So I could set up this statement to be something like this with a double equals and checking for equality, or I can just use the Boolean as I did here. Let's see if this code executes. There's usually some little error, so let's see what we got. Oh, I didn't spell print line correctly. And see if we have execution. I think I targeted a value, 25, and it was found. Let's test the value and see if I can find one that is not on the list. Let's say 30, and see what happens. So if I do that and I run the code, it throws an error message. So it says there's an exception, array index out of bounds. Well, if I go back and look at my code, that's because if it's not found, I keep adding to this index and it keeps going through the loop, no matter what. What that means is I need to test the condition not only if found is false, but I need to also make sure that my index is less than the names dot length. Because if I don't test both of those conditions, in other words, I'm checking to see if I found it yet or if I'm already at the end of the list. If I'm at the end of the list, I don't want to check anymore. So I have to create what's called a compound conditional there. And so now the value was not found and it runs correctly. Okay. So I think my indentations are off just a little bit here, but that gives you an introduction to using a linear search where you are setting a subscript to 0 to start. That's the algorithm that we're using. We set a flag value to false. We test the condition. Okay, we're going to examine each element in the array here, and if it matches right here, if it matches, we set the flag to true. If it doesn't match, then we increment the index if it doesn't match. Okay, and then when we're all done, we can use that flag value to print out a message or anything that we might need. All right, that is your tutorial on using a linear search.